visit to the site and have no bias in these matters, nor am I a decision maker. But no doubt reflect.
Thank you, David. Consider that done, because I believe we've started recording. So welcome everybody to Norwich City Council's Licensing Subcommittee. It's Wednesday, 10th of November 2021. We have one item on the agenda today, and that is the application for variation of premises licence of Roger Hickman's Restaurant, 79 Upper St Giles Street in Norwich. So I'll start with introductions. My name is Ian Stuteley, I'm your chair today. We have Councillor Caroline Ackroyd to my left, Councillor Sue Sands to my right. David Lawrence, who I've already mentioned, is our legal representative from NP Law. Maxine, you know, from the licensing team, and Leonie is helping us with the tech today. And I believe members of the public, we have Roger Hickman, the applicant, Stephen Pickering, the applicant's agent, and Christopher Gooding, who is the objector to this application. So we'll start with Maxine, please, and no, we won't. We'll do apologies, and I believe there are no apologies. Declarations of interest, we've heard from David, and I should say that Mr. Gooding is an employee of the City Council, but none of the representatives here from the panel know Mr. Gooding or have worked with him, so there's no predetermination to declare. Okay, thank you. Maxine, if you'd like to introduce the report, please.
Members are asked, in accordance with the delegation of licensing functions contained in the Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy, Licensing Act 2003, to consider the application for the variation of the premises licence in respect of Roger Hickman's Restaurant, 79 Upper St Giles Street, Norwich, NR2 1AB, following receipt of relevant representation. It's recommended that the members determine the application to vary the premises licence in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003, guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, and Norwich City Council Statement of Licensing Policy.
Hello, sorry, just to stop you there. Is there anything you'd like to say further to the licensing policy?
I understand it's going to be rewritten. It's going to a licensing for meeting at the end of November.
Chair, if it becomes an issue, I'll flag the legal weight to be given to it, the local licensing policy, not the statutory national guidance. There's very limited in you. In fact, I'd suggest no weight is given.
Okay, thank you. That's noted by the committee.
The applicant is Hickman's Restaurant Limited of 79 Upper St Giles Street, Norwich, NR2 1AB. In summary, the application seeks to add to the existing licensed area the first floor room to provide the licensable activity of the sale of alcohol every day from 10 till 23:30 in the evening. A copy of the existing licence and operating schedule is attached to Appendix A to the report. A copy of the application form is attached to Appendix B to the report. A copy of a revised plan is attached to Appendix C to the report. A copy of a noise assessment report, including a covering letter confirming this was sent to the objector, is attached to Appendix D to the report. There was no representation received from the responsible authorities. We received representation objecting to the application has been received from one local resident. A copy of the representation is attached to Appendix E to the report. Attached to Appendix F are the elements of the City Council's local licensing policy, which are considered to have a bearing upon the application. Attached to Appendix G are the elements of the national guidance issued by the Secretary of State that are considered to have a bearing upon the application. In summary, in determining the application with a view to promoting the licensing objectives, the subcommittee must give appropriate weight to the steps that are appropriate to promote the licensing objectives, that's to say the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance and the protection of children from harm. The representation, including supporting information presented by all parties. The guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 National Guidance and the Council's own Statement of Licensing Policy. The subcommittee must take such the following steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Grant the application as asked. Modify the conditions of the licence by altering or omitting or adding to them. Reject the whole or part of the application. The subcommittee is asked to note that it may not modify the conditions or reject the whole or part of the application merely because it considers it desirable to do so. It must actually be appropriate in order to promote the licensing objectives. The representation received appears to relate to issues that fall under the licensing objectives. The subcommittee is directed to paragraphs 20 and 24 of the local licensing policy at Appendix F, which contain examples of factors that impact on the licensing objectives that the applicant could consider when addressing these issues. These paragraphs also contain examples of control measures that may be taken into account in operating schedules, having regard to the type of premises and or the licensable activities. The subcommittee is also reminded of the contents of appendices 2, 3, 4 and 5 of the local licensing policy, not reproduced in this report, which contain clauses of model conditions relating to the four licensing objectives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maxine. So again, reference to the local policy throughout that report, and the committee should note that should note the issues that David has raised on the local policy. David, would you like to expand on that?
No, Chair, I think the local policy, we can park that for the moment. There is an issue of clarification, though. On page 35 of your agenda, you'll see there's a plan. And I think the licensing officer has just referred to it as the relevant plan. Sorry, the plan, it's on the agenda, so. However, the plan I received and handed out to you earlier, I think has extra data. There's a yellow line on the plan we've just received this morning.
Yes, so for the purposes of the hearing today, the plan we've received is the one that we will reference. Is that correct?
It's a question to the licensing officer.
Yeah, that is the same plan.
Isn't there an additional yellow line on the one we just handed in?
Yeah, and I think what it is not coming out on the agenda.
Yeah, it's a difficulty with doing black and white copies of colour plans, especially when lines are missed. So just to confirm, the plan received by the licensing officers, the plan to be looked at for this variation, is the colour one handed out this morning.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Does the applicant have a copy of that?
Yes, that's the plan that I sent to you with the noise assessment report.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Yes, I can see that the line probably is very faint on that, but it is there. So we'll reference this colour version, and that is the
I think there's a
plan.
couple of things. There was the fact that for some reason on the original plan, the window in the room for which we're making the application wasn't shown, and also the demarcation in the kitchen to show that there's a separate. The entrance into the room is separated from the kitchen area.
Yeah. Okay.
So both of those.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're clear to yourselves. Yeah.
Yes, we'll have questions about that. The main purpose of the meeting is to discuss the noise issue, because that's the complaint that we've received, or the objection we've received. We have a few other questions that we'll cover. But first, would you like to introduce yourselves and the restaurant and the proposals that you've got for this upstairs room and the variation, please?
Yes, good morning. You can hear me all right, yes? My name's Stephen Pickering. I'm the agent representing the applicant, Roger Hickman, who's sitting here next to me. This is an application to vary the premises licence to add to the licensed area a first floor room for use solely for occasional private parties for a maximum of 16 people. The application was made on the 19th of July and sent to the licensing team. I believe they received that on the 20th, and to all responsible authorities. It was advertised in the Norwich Evening News on the 26th of July, and blue notices were displayed in accordance with the regulations. There have been no representations other than from the one objector. Police, fire authority and other local residents are happy with the application. A few words concerning my client, just to introduce him to you and his background. He's an experienced and respected chef and restaurateur, having operated the business for around 12 years. The premises is quiet and calm, attracting diners who wish to enjoy good food in a calm setting. It does not cater for noisy or rowdy clientele and offers nothing to attract them. There is no provision for live or recorded music. I repeat that this is a quiet and peaceful premises. Regarding the application before you, the first floor room was disused for many years, and my client saw the potential to use the room for the occasional private party. It is part of number 79, and as shown on the plan, the entrance through the finishing kitchen is clearly separated. That's what we spoke about before, the line. With the effect of the pandemic on small businesses, it would be an important additional income stream for the applicant. My client has now had the noise assessment report prepared, and this has been sent to the licensing team and to the objector. The surveyor has not found any real concerns regarding noise escaping from the first floor room. His recommendations regarding various remedial work and the keeping of windows closed, etc., will be undertaken by the applicant, and he will confirm that. He will also have a noise management plan drawn up as mentioned in the report. I've seen and read the 8th October email from the objector. He specifies his concerns regarding noise from diners, it being a 300-year-old building, etc. I would suggest we have a trading restaurant next door to which the objector has chosen to live. This is not a rowdy pub or a music venue. The only additional activity being sought is occasional use of one room for a limited number of guests. To summarise, this is an application which has raised no objection from responsible authorities or any other local resident other than the one objector. The objector bought a house next door to a commercial premises and should expect that there should be a reasonable level of noise. The applicant is a responsible owner-operator and has had no problems for the last 12 years. The first floor room would be used on an occasional basis for a limited number of guests. The hours have been reduced. I made an application originally 2 years ago where we asked for 1:30 closing time. That's now been reduced to 11:30. A noise assessment has been carried out, and in my opinion, no serious issues have been raised. The applicant is aware that if this application is granted, he will need to apply for change of use for the room. In common with all operators of restaurants, pubs and hotels, my client has suffered considerable loss of income during the pandemic. This application is a very limited and modest additional income stream to allow the applicant to try to regain income lost. I ask that this application be granted.
Okay, thank you for that, and welcome back to the committee. This is the 4th time we've tried to have this hearing, so welcome back. David, you indicated you might wish to make something.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points of clarification. There's nothing on the operating schedule to say a maximum of 16 persons. Are you amending your operating schedule now?
We're having to limit 16 persons on the yes.
As you know,
yes.
matters changed by you may not be appealed if you are successful. So therefore, I'm asking for just confirmation that we can read as it were into page 33 that there will be a maximum of 16 persons present in this room.
Yes.
Not guests, I flagged 16 persons. If you mean maximum 16 guests and staff additional.
Not including staff, obviously.
So it's going to be a max
of 16 guests with additional staff, unknown.
Yes, staff as necessary, yes.
Thank you. You also said closing time of 23:30. As you know, on page 32 of the agenda, the hours open at 2400.
Yes, that's the hour. Yes, sale of alcohol, sorry, 23:30.
Thank you.
And closing time is 12. Yes,
So it's slightly confusing, but no, it's ceasing alcohol at 23:30, 2400, effectively at the closing time.
Thank you, David.
Sorry, Chair, that was the last one.
Yeah.
Are you making it again part of your operating schedule that the window in the toilet will remain closed at all times?
yes, yeah, I'm just happy to have that as part of the operating schedule.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have a few questions from the panel, and then we'll speak to Mr. Gooding as the objector and ask for his thoughts. Okay, so the first question I've got is regarding the restaurant and its operation. When do you plan to finish taking orders for meals in this particular room?
Hello.
Yeah, Mr. Pickney, you'll need to just turn your mic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's quite a unique setup because they just have a taster menu, so it's not like a normal part of the restaurant. So they all get the same. So it's always about 7:30, and they just have a taster menu, and then so we can't. It's not like you take orders and there's a time when you take orders. They book that room, they get a taster menu, and that's it. There's no choice.
Okay, so to confirm, you won't be taking orders for food after 11 o'clock? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Sands, please.
My question is about public safety, and it's back at the kitchen again. You notice on page 33 that you have stated in your application that the upstairs has its own kitchen. Okay, that's been revised since the last time we looked at it, and I queried about a working kitchen and customers walking through. So now we've got a little bit more information. It's always really helpful to try and make an informed decision if we do have all that information to start off with. Not trying to tell you the job, obviously, but it's hard to look at something and try and imagine. Imagining doesn't work for me. I need to have the facts, okay? So now there's a line drawn there. We have had that highlighted on the plan we have today. My question is, which side of that do the customers walk through? A line on there indicating a service counter. So looking at the plan, is the service counter the part on the left, or is the service counter the part on the right? Because if it's the one on the right, I do have a question about that. Basically, where are the staff going to be standing on that line? To the left of that line facing it, or to the right of that line? No, not a problem.
The line shown, the area to the left of the line is the finishing kitchen, and the area to the right of the line is in effect the passageway that customers will
Pass through.
Okay. Into the room.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, I've done the maths, and 1 centimetre equals 1 metre in this scale. So that area that the customers are going to pass through is slightly longer than a school ruler. I've just retired from teaching, so I remember, so which is slightly longer than this page. Now, walking sideways, there are people who would probably have difficulty coming through that, and I guess evacuation might be a bit difficult if they have to go one at a time sideways through that gap. It doesn't seem to me to be an adequate space, talking about public safety now, to either go through to the toilet or to go up and down the stairs. And also, if that is indeed a finishing kitchen and not an actual kitchen, given that the licence is for alcohol, which you're asking for, not food, does that mean that the finishing is going to occur in that area and then go back downstairs. How is it going to work? First of all, my main interest is, because I know there's some other questions coming, my main interest is how are people going to get through a space of 35 centimetres?
That's obviously the wrong measurement.
Well, I'm really sorry, Mr. Hickman, but I can only go by the plan and the scale, which is indicated here, 1.5 at A3, and that is 1 metre equals 1 centimetre. So if that is not scaled correctly, I'm not sure how I can make a decision if I'm not given the right information.
Okay, just to follow up on that, the plan, we've agreed that the plan that we're using is the one that's been supplied with the lines drawn on them, and we have to use these as our guide because they are legally our guide.
Excuse me, surely that's logic that's obviously not going to be like that.
It may seem logical to you, but as we as members of the committee can only work on information we're given. We haven't been in your restaurant, we haven't looked at the space. If you're now saying that this is not to scale and this plan is incorrect, then we need to have a look at a new plan.
David, can you advise the applicant?
Chair, it's back to the lawfulness of the decision and the need for clarity and precision as to what you're being asked to consider. This morning you've had a plan. I understand it's the most recent plan. It's got a yellow line on it. The council has flagged an area for the public to pass and repass of approximately 35 centimetres. So, a couple of questions for the applicant, I guess. Do you agree the measurement? And if you don't, let's have another one. If you do agree, but your comment is that the plan you've given us is not actually what you want to build, then we're going to have to carry on and consider it. So, Chair, with your permission, I think the applicant needs to respond firstly on the 35mm point, and secondly on whether this plan is accurate. Centimetres, beg your pardon.
Okay, so thank you. So just for clarity there, if you have other measurements to hand and you can provide those to us now, then we can clear this up immediately. Otherwise, we have to proceed with the application based on the scale of the map provided, the plan provided.
That doesn't fit in with the scale of the room. I'm terribly sorry, but if you're now saying it's the width of the door, that's half the kitchen, well, 2/3 of the kitchen, if your scale on this plan is correct, you know?
Okay, Councillor Sands, I think there's a suggestion here that the line is drawn slightly in the wrong place, so it's too far to the right on the plan. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So there is, at both ends of that line, there is wider space for members of the public to pass through, either to leave the building or to enter the room that's going to be the licensable area. Is that correct? Okay. Can you put a measurement on that for us to consider, and Damien will advise whether that's satisfactory.
Chair,
I know this is the fourth time this is here, and with regret, a plan has been provided with this variation. That plan, not a different plan, has been advertised. Persons reading the advert will have responded, possibly based on that plan. You now hear that the plan is inaccurate. and again in a fundamental respect regarding public safety.
May I just make one comment? This plan that was sent to you with the noise assessment report, it wasn't the plan that was on the original application, so it won't be the plan that any potential objector would have seen. So they would never have seen
Right.
this plan.
When I asked if this
This
was
plan has only
the...
been served on the objector and on the licensing team at the City Council.
There may be a question for the licensing team. We have an updated plan. Are you saying the decision of this committee should not be based on the plan we handed out this morning, but on a different one?
Clearly, it's not accurate.
Okay, we asked in the previous meeting for the kitchen area to be indicated on the plan. Any such plans do need to be accurate, and we're faced now with a position where we have two plans, and the original plan, if we're to use that as the plan to reference, has information missing, and the new plan has incorrect information on it. So we are finding ourselves in a difficult position. David, can you propose a solution that we can have now, where we can still proceed with this hearing today, please?
Yes, Chair. We need clarity on which plan you are being asked to consider. In other words, the extent of the variation. It's a very fundamental point. And I'd invite you to take 5 minutes out whilst the applicant has a word with the licensing team and we find out which plan is attached to this application. It's not really a legal point, it's a practical one.
Okay, so what we'll do, Leonie, is that we'll pause the meeting for a period of 10 minutes so that you can discuss this with the licensing team, and we'll come back and see what you propose.
Would it be helpful, excuse me for interrupting, would it be
No worries.
helpful if Mr. Hickman goes to the restaurant now and measures that space?
Well, the restaurant is very close to us, isn't it? So
Yes.
that might be very helpful, actually, if the committee is able to wait for that to happen.
Yes, as quick as you can.
I'm looking for indications from my colleagues. I think for the purpose of accuracy, I would recommend that you do that. So, can you take a measurement at both ends of the proposed kitchen area? Councillor Ackroyd, please.
Well, it was just a question. When you drew the line in, you only drew that line in, did you do a sort of accurate measurement to put that line in, or was that more or less, or did you intend that to be an indication rather than accurate? I think that's my question, which obviously when you go back and measure, we'll find out, because it is important. Thank you.
I think it would be fair to say it was for identification purposes rather than being, just to show that the query was raised by, I believe, the councillor in the yellow jacket. I'm sorry, your name, I can't read it. Sue, if I may call you Sue. I think the question was raised by Sue. She was concerned that customers would be walking through a kitchen. I think you were concerned with health and safety and possibly hygiene. Yes, no, I'm going back to last time. Sorry, I'm going back to last time. And I think you were concerned, quite rightly, that would be, a possible area of concern. So we basically amended the plan to show that there's a sort of a counter which is used to serve, a bit like a breakfast bar, if you like, you might have in your home kitchen. But it's a counter that the food is put onto, then the waiting staff take into the guests. And the edge of the line was meant to indicate that. Now, the line was drawn just to identify the fact that there is a passageway there, separate from the kitchen, rather than it being specifically accurate to a measurement.
Okay, thank you. I think
Can I just respond to that?
Councillor Sands, actually, I think we'll just go to the next stage of this, which is to get us some. Councillor Sands, if you just get the measurements for us. Unfortunately, there's been a communication issue here. We do need to have the accurate plans. So if you wouldn't mind just getting us the information that we need, because we need to proceed with this today. If we can, please.
Just an idea, we were under the impression it was for identification purposes rather than being as accurate as being.
Okay, the committee has accepted that, but we do need to have an accurate plan. So we'll need to have a measurement of the space for people to pass through at both ends of the proposed kitchen unit, please. Well, obviously you've got to go back to the property. So can you give us an indication of how long that will take you, please? 15 minutes. Okay, so we'll stop the meeting for now and reconvene in 15 minutes' time. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to Norwich City Council Licensing Subcommittee, Wednesday, 10th November 2021. We're hearing from Roger Hickman's restaurant for variation of the premises licence application, and the address is 79 Upper St Giles Street, Norwich. The applicant has just returned to the premises to get some measurements for us relating to the plan, and I'll hand over now to Mr Pickering, who will present that new data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, well, we've returned from the premises. We've measured the gap between the, if you look at the plan, the top of the plan where the service bar shows the narrowest space, at its narrowest is 125 centimetres, and at the lower end of that room, before you go into the area that's designated as the restaurant, it's 162 centimetres. So those are the measurements, so that gives you that information.
Thank you very much. So that's about just over 4 foot at the narrowest, and 5 foot.
5 foot 6 for me if you had old-fashioned measurements.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. So that clearly is adequate for people to move through. Councillor Sands, do you have any follow-up questions to that?
Yes, I do. What is the width of the room itself?
Measure that by, it's on the scale of 1 to 50.
Well, you've given it to us in centimetres, the openings, which is good. How wide is the room itself?
At the lower end, it looks like it's approximately half. So I would imagine the room would be around about 3.2 to 3.5 metres in width.
So that's a guesstimate, is it?
It is. Sorry, I didn't realise you wanted those measurements, and I was a long time.
Okay, I think the key measurements have been provided.
Right.
There's access for people, including staff and customers.
Just one more, if you may indulge me.
Please do.
162 centimetres is at the wider end. Now, on my plan, and I guess everybody else's, there's a wall or something. So,
It juts out, right?
Juts out.
Yes, there is a very small jut out. Yeah,
okay.
But
So
we've taken that into account.
Okay, so it's 162 centimetres from that.
From that jut
correct?
out to the service counter, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hope you appreciate we needed to clear that up for legal reasons.
I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, further questions from members, please. Councillor Ackroyd.
Thinking about the installation sound and the sound assessment that you've had carried out, which I think you mentioned you were in favour of completing some bits of, I'm wondering what steps you'd already taken along that, for instance, door closure, and following on from that, whether you have tried to find out, for instance, removing the stained glass, which was one of the suggestions in order to put in a false ceiling. Have you taken any steps to find out whether that would in fact be allowed? So firstly, have you carried out any steps already towards, completing those things that were suggested?
Yes, a couple of answers there. Yes, first of all, we haven't gone into any great depth in the work that we had to do because we were waiting for this application to be considered this morning. As far as the stained glass window is concerned, I think it would be quite likely that this might be protected under listing, and in those circumstances it's difficult to see how anything could be easily altered. I mean, I'm not a surveyor or a planner, so I don't know, but I would assume that because it's a listed building and it has this special window in it, I think it would be unlikely to be able to alter the window or take it out or anything like that. As far as putting door closers on doors, yes, we can do that, and we've already given an undertaking that we'll keep the toilet window closed so that the sound doesn't come out from there. So yeah, done as much as we can so far, but as I said in my introduction here, the applicant is prepared to do the minor remedial works that have been outlined in the noise assessment plan, should this application be granted this morning.
Okay, thank you.
To try and insulate so that the gentleman here gets the least sound coming from his property.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any follow-ups?
Well, simply to say that, for instance, things like a soft door closure would benefit the applicant anyway, so that might be something you would take on board anyhow, and it would be good to see that kind of remedial action being put in. So that might be something that hopefully you would consider. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sands, please.
Okay, so toilet windows can be closed at all times, without getting too specific about toilets. Usually you need to have some kind of airflow in there after people have used the facilities. So what are you proposing, an exhaust fan instead?
I would assume that there isn't a fan in there now, there certainly should be one, because toilets in hotels, restaurants and public houses, all, in my experience, all have extractor system, even if they have an opening window. So I'm sure that the extractor fan would be installed.
So would that be a silent extractor fan?
Yes, it'd be a small, it's not going to be some great big thing you have in the kitchen.
So that would be
going... Just a small one, either set in the window or set in the wall, or in the ceiling, possibly, to take out any smells, yeah.
And another public health question, you've had no problems with the fire service when they had a look and looked at your evacuation plan? They were happy that it was safe enough for people to be evacuated from the room?
We had no objections or representations from the
So that's fine.
So one would assume that that means that they're content with the application as far as they're concerned.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So we're hearing that you as the applicant are prepared to install some mitigating measures. So soft close on the doors is one of those that's been suggested. Are you offering that as mitigation as part of your application?
Yes, the applicant is happy to put door springs on the doors where appropriate, yes. And also, he's already indicated, your colleague there mentioned about extraction in the toilet, so that could be installed.
Okay, so...
Chair, just need to get precise wording, because if it's too vague, it's unenforceable. So, Mr. Pickering, you just said, I think, where appropriate, or something like that. Could you give me the precise wording?
Door closers, I said, where appropriate, yeah. According to which doors need, some may not need a spring on them, I don't know, I'm not, as I say, I'm not an expert on such matters, but the door closers will be installed where they need to be, so that the doors will close automatically when people walk through them. And likewise, the extraction system will be installed in the toilet. Because the window, my client's already given that to take a little window on their clothes, so obviously, as the councillor said, there needs to be some kind of ventilation in there.
Okay, thank you.
Still on the wording, Chair, sorry, automatic door closures will be installed on all doors, or not?
No.
Okay, which doors?
Just the doors that... Yes, the ones at the base of the stairs, I would guess. The one that goes into the kitchen, which gives access with the passageway into the dining area.
Base of the stairs?
Or probably one on the toilet door, I guess.
That's kitchen?
Yeah, and toilet door. Yeah, the doors that...
He's suggesting we do the flat above as well, because there's a flat above it. He's saying we've got to put door closures on that.
Yes, this is from you to the committee, rather than vague. Sorry to be awkward, but I need to be precise, because if it's not precise...
That's why I'm asking the question. Is it every door in the flat?
And then again, it is from you to the committee as to what is your operating schedule, what are you going to do.
Sorry, could I just say that I don't think the flat's relevant as far as this application is concerned. We're talking about places where the public who are booked into the room will go. And they're not going to go in the flat. They're going to, they're going to be going through the door from the street. They're going to go into the toilet. They're going to go into the kitchen, which has the passageway through into the dining room. So those are the doors. Those are the only doors that members of the public will be using.
Thank you. I think for the purpose of this application, doors that will be used as a result of extending the licensable area into the upstairs room.
Yes, that makes sense.
And one of those, of course, is the front door, which will be used presumably a little more on evenings when this is in use. So we've heard about the front door and two further doors, and those are the doors. David, are you content with that specification?
Door, toilet door, kitchen door. Is that a good summary?
Yep. So they will be fitted with soft close units so that they no longer slam, and they will be serviced.
And the close, if people don't pull the door to themselves, it will close, which will help to stop the sand travelling.
Yes, okay, and they will be maintained accordingly.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And the other one was silent extractor can to be fitted in toilet.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just for the purpose of members of the public and the applicant, we have to ask these questions simply because if the determination of the committee today goes one way or another, an appeal process may take place, and we have to have everything entirely watertight in terms of the legal. So please bear with us when we ask such questions. Thank you. Councillor Sands.
Back to the toilet again. I noticed on this plan there isn't a window indicated. Is that correct? So would the extractor fan go in the wall?
I guess.
Is there actually a window there? Because I mean, you're saying it's closed, but I'm not seeing a window.
I would suggest that my client would engage the services of an electrician who would come in and advise him where would be the best situation to put the extractor fan. If there's a flat roof above.
Okay, that's fine.
The ceiling. I would guess it would go in the wall.
Okay. My question is, if you recall, a few meetings ago, there was no window indicated on the room, which was a concern of the actual room being used. There's no window indicated on the toilet either. So I guess my question is there a window there that isn't on this plan? Once again, the plan's not accurate. Or is it a wall? Because, okay, please bear with me. If you've got an extractor fan in a window, once again, I'm not an engineer either, but there's a difference between putting an extractor fan in a glass window and knocking a hole for a wall. So is there a window for you to put the fan in, or is there as indicated on our plan, again, a wall?
As I said before, I think it would be a matter for the electrician to advise the client.
I just want to know if there's a window there, sir. Well, we don't know. I'm sorry, Mr. Hickman, I don't know. I can only take from what you've given us. And what you've given us does not indicate a window.
You're asking us to close the window and thought, so you know there's a window.
Do what?
Why are you asking us to close the window?
If I'm asking you to close a window, you need to have a window to close. And there ain't one.
Just for clarity, the committee hasn't asked you to keep the window shut. You've offered that as part of your application. It is for members of the public. The plan we're looking at doesn't have a window on the toilet, so it's another window missing from the plan. But we accept that there's a window, and the applicant has offered that it will be closed and replaced, or an extraction fan will be inserted.
It's given an undertaking that we will put the extractor fan in the toilet.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Respect.
From page 9 of the report, which is 47 of our pack, discussion and recommendations from your sound engineer. There's point 5.2. There's a recommendation in there to insert some further insulation in the hallway, between the hallway and the living room. Has this been investigated?
So which number?
5.2 on page 47 of the pack.
Yeah, I think I made the point earlier that that my client is happy to put in hand any remedial work that would reduce the sound from travelling into this gentleman's house. So that would include, I think all this needs to be lumber, I guess. Again, I'm not a surveyor, so I don't know exactly what would be required, but you know, it would be, the work would be taken, you know, the work would be carried out and done.
Okay, so are you offering as part of this application to?
The client has confirmed that he will be prepared to undertake to do that.
Okay, and does that apply to all points of discussion and recommendation, or only certain elements of that?
We need 5.2.
Well, 5.2 is the first one that I've mentioned. 5.3 is another, and actually there are suggestions in a number of these paragraphs about mitigation that you could undertake, and we'll need to know whether you plan to undertake those or whether you'll commit to undertake those before we hear from the objector and his views on those and whether that changes his view.
Chair, the applicant needs to be very careful at this point.
But they do. Again, I'm going to suggest that we break for 10 minutes and you read rather than me reading out each of the points and asking you in turn which one you wish to implement. I'm going to suggest that we stop for 10 minutes and you can go outside if you wish to and have a discussion about which of the specific recommendations that you're going to offer to the committee as part of your application today, please. So Leonie, if you wouldn't mind just stopping for 10 minutes, we'll come back at Okay, thank you and welcome back. Norwich City Council Licensing Subcommittee, Wednesday 10th November 2021, continuing the meeting after a short break to discuss mitigating measures. Mr Pickering, can you indicate now what of those measures recommended by your noise expert the applicant is willing to take on?
Thank you very much. Yes, we've had discussion outside. We've gone through this, basically section 5, beginning on page 9, yeah? Yes. So we agreed to recommendation on 5. You want me to give you this verbally, what we agreed to, yeah?
Yes, please, yes. Just indicate which one specifically you'd like to implement.
Yes. Well, 5, 2, 5, 3 and 5, 4 we agreed that we will, if this is granted today, we will have that work undertaken. 5, there may be a problem with this window that might be listed, but so I'm not sure how we can answer that one. Well, I understand the windows is actually the one over the entrance doors from the street. So it's, yes, it's not close to where only when the customers are leaving or arriving will that area be in use. There's a passageway basically.
Okay, we've heard about that and the issue, the listed building status. Okay, so. Okay, so for the purpose of the committee today, we'll ignore 5.5 as a mitigation measure.
5, 6 is just a comment, so there's nothing there to say. 5, 7 and 5, 8, we've agreed work to be done on those.
Okay.
And then 5, 10 also.
5, 7, 5, 8 and 5, 10.
Yeah. 5, 11 is kind of linked to 5, 10, isn't it?
Yes, so 5.10
so 5, 11
is introduction of a noise management plan.
Yes, so we've already undertaken to implement a noise management plan, so 10 and 11 refer to that. Then 5, 12, we had a discussion earlier.
Yeah, that's been covered.
Door closes, so that's been covered. Yes, and we're happy with signage through the building on 5.13. 5.14 already, my client informs me that the staff call taxis. That's 5.15, I beg your pardon. 5.14, yes, the guests are escorted out by staff members, and 5.15 staff arrange taxis when the customers don't have their own vehicles. So yes, we're going to those two.
Okay, thank you. Relating to 5.15, and that is staff calling taxis. Does that work for you okay? And do taxi drivers respond to your request to turn off their engines when they arrive? Use your microphone, please.
A lot of the taxis now are electric, so you don't hear them.
Yeah, so some taxis are electric.
Yeah, but we use courtesy and most of them are electric. But I'm happy to change taxi company if that's an issue.
Okay, so you use a firm that's exclusively electric taxis. Okay, thank you.
Chair, follow on just for clarity. Regarding those matters, para 5 there, I don't think 5.2 does anything other than to say sound insulation is improved. So I wouldn't particularly worry about mentioning that. Relevant though is an idea of when the applicant is saying he will do the works by. So in other words, in advance of any use of this area or not.
I would suggest that the applicant, if today's application is granted, the applicant will immediately contact building companies and present them with this report and ask them to presumably to quote initially. I mean, maybe they'll get more than one company in. Yeah, get it all organised, it all done.
Okay, so therefore the question that David is asking is, will you implement these measures before you operate the upstairs room as a restaurant, subject to the application being granted?
Subject to the sale.
It's not bad, it's not. Saying it's a restaurant, it's not. It's just a room. Restaurant's totally different in my eyes.
Okay, yeah. We're hearing that it's a room that's previously a dwelling. So turning the dwelling room into a commercial room does require some mitigation. And we're going to hear from the applicant in a moment about that noise. I just wanted to pin down the mitigation measures that you wanted to implement, and that may affect how our objector sees the application, views the application. So just indicate when you'll implement those measures by, please. So will it be before the restaurant opens up in the upstairs room?
As soon as possible, but obviously we're coming to Christmas and, well, there's no way I'll get the work done before Christmas, because the builders take ages. So as soon as I can get it done, I'll get it done.
Chair, I can't write that as a condition. It's only
That's the way of the road though.
If you could let me know whether or not you're offering for these measures to be done and in prior to the sale of alcohol in that room. We're not asking you for a date.
You are?
No, I'm not. You're either going to do it in advance or you're not.
I'm going to do it in advance.
You are going to do it in advance.
Yeah.
So these measures you've flagged, you're offering as part of your operating schedule that they will be carried out and in prior to the licensed activity commencing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Mr. Gooding is still with us, and he hasn't had a chance to speak yet. So you've heard a number of mitigating measures that the applicant has put forward, volunteered. Can you, with those in mind, can you address the committee with your concerns, please?
Yes, well, my concern is around noise and noise to my household. I would just like to point out it was raised that I bought a house next to a restaurant. Actually, I bought a house next to the dwelling above a restaurant. So this is a change of use. My main thought really is, taking a step back, I'd like to see this go for change of use through the planning system, so that the suitable noise mitigation measures could have been put in at that stage, rather than relying on this and relying on me to make a decision now as to whether things are acceptable or not, because I'm not a noise expert. I've got some understanding of noise, but I'm an acoustic expert. My premises has been subject to noise nuisance previously, and this is actually, Mr. Hickman is aware that a previous occupier of that building ran it in such a way that it caused a noise nuisance, I think, both to his restaurant and to my home, so I am sensitive to this. My recommendation would be that change of use and listing building consent is achieved before, with suitable noise mitigation measures put in place before the licence can be in place.
Okay, I think, from our point of view as a committee, the planning process and the licensing process are separate, as you know, and it is up to the applicant in which order they process those. In this case, we've got the licensing first, and we'll make our decision based on licensing matters and the 4 licensing objectives, rather than planning matters. David, is there anything else you'd like to say about that?
Chair, just that it is the stage of making sure you know precisely what the applicant is asking for and will do, and that has now been usefully provided.
It is separate to the planning system. The applicant will need to sort out both systems. They're running together, but you will not be making a decision based on what the planners may or may not choose to do if an application is made at some future time.
Yes, thank you. And it's fair to say that when the application for change of use is presented to the planning department, you'll have an opportunity to feedback on that and make your views known. Mr. Gooding, please continue.
All right. So I think I've gone through my thoughts on the noise assessment. I think it's quite clear. I haven't got anything further to add. I think there was a missing assessment between the entrance hall and my dining room. Occasionally my dining room is used for sleeping in, and so I have a sofa bed in there, so there's a potential for noise nuisance coming through. That particular wall is very thin. But no, I've stated my thoughts in response to the noise assessment.
Okay, thank you. And in relation to the mitigating measures that have been offered in this committee, what is your response to those?
I'm not expert enough to judge whether they'll be sufficient, unfortunately. So currently I can hear noise through the wall when the room is operating, and in certain places I can actually hear people's conversations, not actually from the dining room but from the landing. So.
Okay, thank you. So your experience so far of the noise transmitting through from one side of the wall to another has been a previous residential residence there, is that correct?
It was a operator who rented accommodation around the city without much control. So.
Okay, so it was residents of previous next
door.
So
basically it was a party house.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I mean, it's not the level of that, but it's just having the experience living next door to somewhere where there is noise nuisance. I appreciate that difficulty it is to live in it. And also, I mean, this application is for 7 days a week, sort of all day, 7 days a week, which I realise Mr. Hickman may not operate at, but this is what you would be giving him permission to do.
Yes. Okay. So, Mr. Hickman, how many? You say that this is for occasional use. How many uses, or how many times I believe that it may be used? What's in your business plan for the number of uses in perhaps a year or per month?
I would say 3 times a week. 2 to 3 times a week.
2 to 3 times a week throughout the year. Okay, so it's probably more than occasional. That's a regular, perhaps even frequent use. Are you expecting those dates or those days to be weekend days or at any time of the week?
Some could be lunches, some could be evenings. But I don't open on Sunday or Monday, so it's only 5 days. It's irrelevant. I don't know what. If when they book it, it's when they want to book it, but I'll not do restrictions on it.
Okay, so currently the restaurant doesn't open on Sundays and Mondays. Okay, but the application is still for 7 days a week.
Yeah, it's just so we just did that.
Yeah.
Because that's just we reduced the times as well on it as well. But I'm happy to change that.
Chair, once again, it's for the applicant to say if it's being changed or not. At the moment, it's a 7 day a week application.
If I change it and then New Year's Eve falls on a Sunday, I can't use it.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, obviously 7 days a week.
That's why I kept it 7 days.
Gives you the flexibility. Although, of course, if you are restricted on any given day, you can apply for a temporary event notice for those for any days that fall outside the licensing times. It's for you as the applicant to consider whether you wish to restrict yourself further through the application process.
There is no need to do so. This is your application. Just committee needs to be clear what it's considering.
Yeah, and to be clear, the committee is not asking you to do this. We're asking you if you wish to do this.
Yeah, I'll keep it as is then.
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
Keep it as it is.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay, just going back to the report. You had the report in, the noise report that is, in September, 15th of September this year. What time of day was that report, please?
Lunchtime.
Sound recordings were taken around lunchtime. Is there a fact that it was at lunchtime when noise levels in the area are different to evening noise levels? Is there an implication for evening noise levels? I think that's the issue that Mr. Gooding has with the extended hours into the evening. When background noise levels are different, is there an implication here that there would be a change? Can you comment on that? So would noise levels, as they drop in the evening, generally in the area, would there be a higher level of noise transmission through the walls as a result of that? This is a question really for you, Mr. Pickler.
The hours, we know the hours in the evening that we were applying for. 11:36 to find out how 12 o'clock hours are open.
Okay, my question is about the sound report. We've heard in this committee before about how sound travels and how sound works at different times of the day, and at lunchtime in that part of the city, the general sound levels in the area will be quite high and robust of the city, and therefore the perception of sound within the buildings will be less because there will be some transmission from outside. In the evenings, that background noise reduces, and therefore the noise that comes from specific places, like a next door room, may be heightened. So is there a reason why you didn't have the noise levels taken in the evening?
Yeah, I think just the appointment was made for the engineer to come in and there to do the assessment. Sorry, I'm not aware of why a particular time was chosen. I presume doing his work in the house.
Okay, thank you. So there's no specific answer to that question. Okay, any other councillors wish to come in and ask questions? Councillor Sands.
When you stated that Mr. Gooding bought his accommodation for his flat next door to a restaurant, so therefore could expect to have a certain noise level already in place. My understanding of someone chooses to move next to an airport, obviously they're going to expect noise, but Mr. Gooding, when he moved into his residence, he didn't have a restaurant next door. Obviously there would be sound coming from below, where the restaurant was operating at that time, but he actually, from what I can gather from his plan of his accommodation, he was next door to accommodation. Now I know you're going for change of use. I'm interested in your comment saying that basically he bought a residence next to a restaurant and therefore should expect a certain level of noise. It doesn't. Until the change of use is in place and there is actually a restaurant next door, Mr. Gooding didn't make the decision to buy next to that level of noise. I'm just interested in your statement because when you made it, it seemed quite a powerful statement, but I wonder if you could just elaborate on it for me.
Well, yes, I think the point I was making was that he bought a house next to a commercial premises, i.e. a restaurant. There must be some noise that comes from the existing restaurant. I don't know. This is Mr. Gooding's his house, but I'm assuming that there is a level of noise, particularly people coming and going and a certain amount of talking, but there isn't a high level of noise because the premises isn't operated in that way. But so that a small number of people booking the upstairs room on an occasional basis, I wouldn't have thought would have majorly impacted upon his peace in his flat, particularly in view of the fact that the applicant has undertaken to do the remedial work that was outlined in the surveyor's report.
Could I just come back? Sorry, Chair. Okay, so it's for special occasions. Special occasions are celebrations, and in my experience, celebrations don't tend to be quiet. I mean, maybe your customers are quieter than most. And Mr. Gooding already has had the experience, as he said, of having a party room next door to himself, to his home, which obviously was not ideal because he says the wall isn't particularly thick. And I noted in your report that you said that the staff will ask the customers to keep the noise down. Am I correct or am I incorrect there?
Yes, well, I think one of the recommendations here is that signage in the building reminding guests that residential properties may be affected by noise. Staff training to ensure they do not inadvertently cause high noise levels. For example, running up and downstairs, where large groups of guests are using the private dining area, it may be appropriate for staff members to escort guests out when they leave.
Okay.
So, it's the same with any pub or hotel or restaurant. There's going to be a certain amount of talking noise, but there's no other noise. We don't have any music.
No. And I guess that's where I'm coming to with this.
Conversation, like if you and I were to go out for a meal, we would be talking to each other in a normal manner. We would have a conversation during the evening, but it's not going to get out of hand. It's just going to be a normal, we're friends, we're having a conversation, we then go home.
You've got 16 people in a room. It's not a massive room, having a little chat. Everyone's chatting about different things, obviously, such as you do at a dinner party. And you're looking at that happening 3 times a week in the evening. Now, it may or may not happen. It may be more than that. I'm sorry, I'm just taking your recommendation, Mr. Hickman, and the number you gave us is 3 times. So, pardon? Okay, 3 times a week. Okay, all right. So 3 times a week, there could be 16 people in that room on the other side of the wall of a residential dwelling. I just feel that you're putting in soft closing doors and you're doing lots of things, but I still feel that perhaps there needs to be more done if you're going to allow that. I understand that you want the...
Councillor, we're still in process, so I would perhaps...
No, I'm not predetermined. Thank you for your reminder there. I'm not predetermined. I'm just trying to get set in my mind. Okay, they want the licence for 7 days, so there can be occasions when the restaurant is actually shut and they can have the special occasion room open. Am I correct in that? In case there's New Year's Eve or something falls on a day that the restaurant's not normally open. Is that my understanding? Am I correct in that understanding? Because that's what I heard.
The application is for 7 days a week.
Yep.
The point being raised with the applicant line left. 2 occasions, he said no, I will continue with 7 days a week. That's the application.
Okay, so getting back to my point about it, currently the restaurant is open for 5 days a week, and over half of those days could potentially be using this room. I'm just going to leave it there because obviously it's just going to...
Sorry, may I make another point? Obviously, Mr. Green's comments were made in regard to the premises as to that room as it is now, but this morning you've heard from the applicant that he's undertaken to put in remedial work to insulate the sound. So obviously it's going to be a different situation for the next door neighbour when all that sound insulation is installed to what it is now. So it's going to be far less sound than he's been experiencing hitherto.
Okay, thank you. With the report that we've got indicates that the sound levels may be satisfactory in normal circumstances. and I think the recommendations were to mitigate any additional noise situations. And the committee notes that you've presented some of those, or committed to some of those recommendations. We, as noise experts, we must, I think the committee must trust that the report is accurate and the measurements that they've taken and provided to us are accurate measurements at the time that they were taken. Okay, so the committee notes that. Mr. Gooding, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask the applicant, or any requests, anything you'd like to say, or to the panel, please?
No, as I've said, I've made all my comments in that submission in response to the report.
Okay, thank you. One of the items that we've just spoke about is the background noise, and a normal licence doesn't require a specific request for background music. So are you offering to the committee that there'll be no background music, no recorded music played at background levels in this particular room? Okay, David, that was a confirmation.
Yes, Chair. So, as background music would normally be lawful, we're saying no background music. Very good. I mean, I'll note that as part of the operating schedule.
It has been mentioned a couple of times by Mr. Pickering through the committee, so I just thought I'd have that clarified. It's also one of the points that Mr. Gooding made in his response, saying that in the event of background music, noise levels will increase. We have had that in many committees.
Just to flag, Chair, there's a bit of the Licensing Act that says that conditions relating to music will have no effect in certain circumstances prior to, I think it's section 177, prior to reviewing them being imposed. So I note that this operating schedule, I just flag it as a condition. If the premises licence is so varied, you won't be able to enforce it at the moment, prior to a review being introduced, if that happens, and a decision being made as to 177, Licensing Act 2003.
Okay, thank you for that. The implication of that then is that while this is something that we can note as a condition, it may not be enforceable at this time.
Yes, Chair, it's how the applicant intends to run the premises, no background music, noted.
Okay, thank you. If there are any questions from members, from David, or from the applicant to Mr. Gooding, or vice versa, if there are no more, then I think we'll...
Chair, with your permission.
Yes.
I don't think Mr. Gooding is doing himself particular justice by saying, please look at the papers, and nor to you. I feel you may wish to ask him directly as live evidence how the current use affects him.
We've
heard so far that he can hear conversation in the landing. You may wish to hear more of that, and it may be there's nothing else to say, but I just thought to be flagged.
Okay, the committee notes that the applicant has written a detailed response to, in particular, to the noise report. So the committee has read, all members have read that and noted that. So I think David is suggesting that the committee will benefit from hearing from you about the current situation with the restaurant operating downstairs and what you can hear, if anything, from that restaurant from the premises now.
Chair, sorry I wasn't clear. This isn't a planning committee. You're not worried about whether anything is going on planning-wise. It's useful to know if the room is currently in use for the intended purpose. And if it is, that gives you an idea as to Mr. Gooding what's the noise like.
Okay, is the room currently in use? Has it been in use in the last period since the application has been put into us, or indeed prior to that?
I believe it has been in use on a few occasions since the application was put in. I mean, it was largely closed during the COVID pandemic. There was some use, I think, before that.
Okay, and was it used as a restaurant before that?
So we're talking about the upstairs room?
It's the upstairs room, the room that's subject to this variation licence
So yes, it's
application.
used for, I believe, private dining, groups of people who come in and celebrate a certain occasion.
Okay, so this is new information to the committee. The premises is already in use as a upstairs restaurant. Is that correct?
It's not in my understanding that it's not a restaurant, it's a private dining room, it's slightly different. But the applicant is applying for temporary event notices to cover any occasions when people wish to book that room. It's not on the licence request.
Okay, so
he's put in applications for temporary event notices for specific requests from customers that want to book that room.
Okay, so until now, you have the licensing committee. Okay, so 10 applications for 10, so the committee notes that. Okay, so how many times has it been used under the 10's arrangements?
It's the number of applications that this team has made, I guess.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Gooding, can you tell us what you experienced on those days, please? Because actually this is quite important.
Really, it was a comment I made because I've only actually been present on one of the days when there was a party. So yes, I hear the noise from the private dining room until about 11 o'clock at night, and then the conversations in the landing area, and people leaving through the downstairs corridor in the dining room.
Can I just make the point that the applicant was undertaken this morning to have guests escorted out by staff, and also to put signage in the passageways to request that guests do not talk or make a noise when they leave the premises. So this action is going to, if this is approved today, this action will be, this will be dealt with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gooding. Can you describe the levels of noise that you can hear, just so the committee can understand how loud it is, or how the mitigation that's been offered may help with that?
Well, going backwards, it's difficult to know how the mitigation offered will help, because, as I say, I'm not an expert in practicing the dining. Whereas it is an expert, I will just point out that he hasn't dealt with the downstairs corridor and the wall between the downstairs corridor and my dining room in his report. The level of noise, I mean, it's what you would expect at a party, really. It's not, people aren't jumping around as they were before, but I can hear it. I have to turn my television off if I'm watching that. I normally go to bed quite early, and so I can be disturbed. Well, I have been disturbed in the past with noise from the toilet, which abuts the ensuite bathroom.
Sorry, can I just make the point which I made before, that the applicant is undertaken to have standard installation put into the corridor or passageway, except the toilet and the dining area, to combat the nuisance that Mr. William described. And as I said just now, staff will be told to escort customers out of the premises, and signage will be displayed requesting that customers do not make a noise on the dining room.
Okay,
and these things are fresh, additional to Mr. Gooding's experience in the past when those measures were in place.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Gooding, what is the experience between the main wall, which partitions the two rooms, your living room and the proposed dining space?
Well, I have put a certain amount of noise insulation myself onto that wall, so and I can see from the report that the insulation is quite good. It's the flanking insulation that's missing. I mean, you have to understand that this is a 300-year-old building. It's basically the same structure. Rooms have been swapped around, and so basically we share the same joists. beams and
Yeah.
holes under the floorboards. So,
Yes. Okay.
so the noise gets around the wall through the voids under the floor or through the ceiling potentially.
Yeah. Okay. So you've indicated as well that there's an area that's not been covered by the report, and that is a downstairs hallway. Is that correct?
So the ground floor hall for 79 and my dining room have a shared wall. So I couldn't see that in the report, and it is an area. It is an area where. Sorry?
You're talking about the lobby there in the street?
Yes. Yes.
The dimensions of that was...
Yeah, it's talking about the ceiling, isn't it? Which actually goes underneath my sitting room.
This is 5'5", I think.
Yeah, I've got a flying freehold over the top of that wall.
Okay, so you're
so it mentions that, but it doesn't mention the wall on the ground floor wall, the partition wall between the two premises.
okay, so there's a residence of noise through the walls.
And on occasion when I have guests, I have people sleeping in there. So.
Okay, so would the mitigation that's been offered in terms of people not talking through that particular passageway help in any way?
I suggest that after a party it's difficult to stop people talking, and that's been my experience, and then people gather outside and carry on while they wait to leave, making noise about that.
Okay,
I haven't gone into that. It's more about just getting it sorted that the noise insulation is suitable and sufficient between the two premises.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So returning to the noise report, there could be an issue here with planning, and it's unlikely that planning will allow the removal of that window, and remedial works around it may be tricky to happen. Have you investigated, or are you willing to investigate any further soundproofing in that area? Is that something that you can?
I would suggest that when the applicant has the builder in to look at the other work that we've already spoken about earlier in the morning, he will also ask the builder to look at the work necessary in the area that Mr. Goody is describing.
Okay, in terms of enforceability, this offer is not going to be enforceable.
Completely unenforceable, Chair. It's not been offered as a condition, and if it had been, I'd been suggesting it was so vague as to enforce later.
Well, yes. Okay. So in terms of the committee, we should not accept that as a condition unless it's being offered as
it's
such.
Not up to the committee to say how the applicant's going to work his operating schedule. I just like the way to be given to it is very limited. Let's be clear.
Yeah. Okay. I pushed you on this particular question because you've made some fairly comprehensive recommendations yourself about how you may mitigate the noise, and there may be one last element of noise that needs to be addressed, or that you may wish to address before the committee makes its decision.
You're not saying just now that we would address the issue of the noise.
Okay.
Not in the bottom space.
Okay.
I said when the builder comes to advise Mr. Hickman about what work is required, he will be asked to look at that area as well.
Okay, so are you saying that...
I intend for that to go into the condition list.
Okay, so as part of the operating schedule, as part of the pre-process, you will investigate a means to insulate between the two buildings and as recommended. Okay, I think the committee must make its deliberations now, so unless there's anything that any other member here would like to say, or members of the public, we'll take a 15 to 20 minute break to make that decision and ask you to come back
Chair, I'm still on legal enforceability. The last point, so far I've got, will investigate means to insulate the ground floor corridor between noise from the ground floor corridor between the two buildings. Is that a fair summary of what's being said?
Sorry.
Yes.
Do you mind saying it again? Sorry.
The operating schedule, I believe, is being amended to insert the following. Will investigate a means to insulate noise from the ground floor corridor between the two buildings, not something implemented. Thank you. As a, again, Chair, the legal advice happy to give to the public will be vague and unenforceable. Will investigate is a good idea. I'm not saying it's wrong, and I'm not saying it's inappropriate. I just flag that it is of limited value.
From a legal point of view, the committee notes that, but thanks to the applicant for making that recommendation or that voluntary condition. Okay, thank you to everybody. I think we'll need at least 20 minutes, I think, to discuss this. So I would suggest we will reconvene no earlier than 10 to 1. Thank you all for the moment. Okay, good afternoon everybody. Thank you for coming back. It's Norwich City Council's Licensing Subcommittee, Wednesday 10th November 2021. We're considering the application for variation of the premises licence at Roger Hickman's restaurant, 79 Upper St Giles in Norwich. And the committee has reached a determination on this, and it's a unanimous decision to grant the licence as applied for, with amendments that David will cover in a moment. But also, as a committee, we've decided to restrict the timings on Sunday to Thursday to 10:30 for alcohol and 11 o'clock for closing of that part of the building. Okay, so that is our determination, and Friday and Saturday as applied for. The reasons for that is to mitigate noise further, to meet those license. The committee feels that it would help to meet those licensing objectives. David will give more information on that at the moment and about the appeals process. And further to that, the committee thanks you for coming and thank you, Councillor Sands. Just to highlight one item which related actually to the first question I asked at the beginning of the meeting about the provision of late night refreshment. We noted that you don't have application. The application doesn't include late night refreshment, so therefore you're restricted to supplying food to the upper floor to 11 o'clock on those on all days of the week, actually. So I don't know whether that makes any difference to your the way you see this, but David will cover the rest of the items. So just to confirm on that last point, the last course will need to be served by 11 o'clock under this particular application. Okay, thank you.
Chair, so the changes the applicant made to their operating schedule and therefore which are now live: automatic soft door closures will be installed on the following doors: front door, kitchen door, toilet door. Silent extractor fan to be fitted in the toilet. Any window in the toilet to be closed at all times. There will be a maximum of 16 guests in the licensed area. No background music to be played. We'll investigate a means to insulate noise from the ground floor corridor between the two buildings. In addition, the applicant confirmed the premises licence holder, I suppose now, confirmed paras 5.3, 5.4, 5.7, 5.8, 5.10, 5.11, 5.12, 5.13, 5.14 and 5.15 were all introduced, and in addition to that, the necessary works to be done prior to the licensable activity commencing. Obviously, under this particular premises licence, logically, 10 would be a separate authorisation. You've noted the significant noise mitigation measures and that these are to be introduced prior to the use of the variation. You've taken account of the statutory guidance, the papers in front of you and the oral evidence heard. You've taken account of the location, and in order, as you've said, Chair, to meet the licensing objectives regarding certainly public nuisance, you feel it's appropriate for noise in the week to be reduced compared to the weekend, and therefore you've reduced the hours as sought. There are rights of appeal relating to this, both from the applicant due to the imposed condition and from the objector due to the fact that the variation has been granted, and I'm sure your professional will advise you of your rights of appeal further. And the committee has taken into account that there can always be a review procedure should matters proceed badly. Hopefully that won't be the case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder to members of the public, in relation to all licensed premises, should there be any breach of any of the four licensing objectives, they are able to make representations to the council, and in extreme cases, with evidence, seek a review from the committee. So that's for the benefit of the public. So thank you again for attending and for bearing with us through a long meeting, and also for the additional information you've sought to supply through the meeting. And thank you to everybody else for coming.